Ahoy, mateys, and welcome aboard to This Week in Nickelodeon History. Merry Christmas to all of you who happen to be listening to podcasts on Christmas Day for this merry release. And for those of you celebrating any other holidays during this wonderful season, I hope it's a merry one, I hope it's a happy one, a relaxing one, and please, relax yourself. Sit down, come aboard. We're going to celebrate some Nickelodeon anniversaries that have taken place in between the times of December 25th to December 31st, right to the end of the year. So this is it. 2022. Wow, I didn't even prepare that this was also the final episode of This Week in Nickelodeon History, which started out as its own podcast this year. That's something big to celebrate. But I can tell you, there's going to be even more to celebrate in 2023 as this show evolves from its current form into something grander with a purpose I think we all could get behind. And I can't wait to share that information with you. But until then, until that 53rd episode of this podcast, we're going to get through what we get through each and every week. And that's our anniversaries here. With an anniversary that goes all the way back to the 70s. Oh, I had the... Don't you just hate when you have a tab open and then it closes? Now I gotta find this show. One more second. I'm not editing this. It's a Christmas miracle that I'll be able to keep. Hocus Focus, which premiered, here we go, 43 years ago on December 31st, 1979. Hocus Focus was a show that involved a wizard from the Middle Ages being transported to modern-day 1979 to learn about the modern world. And one notable aspect to the cast of this show was Doug and Allegra's window creator Jim Jenkins, who appeared on the show as Professor Rhombus while also being a graphic artist for not only Hocus Focus, but for a few other shows of the time, By the Way, and video comics. But by the way, the show is called By the Way. By the way. Yeah, Jim Jenkins, so he appeared live action on the show Hocus Focus well before my time, which is completely fine. And if you have any memories, if there's anyone out there listening to this who has any memories of watching Hocus Focus and any of Jim Jenkins as Professor Rhombus in general, please let yourselves be known. Find the YouTube version of this video, and I also believe on Spotify you can now leave comments on the video version of this podcast. So let yourselves be heard if you have heard of Hocus Focus. 41 years ago, on December 25th, Christmas Day, 1981, we had the premiere and the final film for First Row Features. The film featured was known as The Christmas Tree. That felt like a mouthful. So First Row Features was an anthology series on Nickelodeon that started in February of 1982 and apparently still ran on Nickelodeon until January 1982 before being replaced by Special Delivery. But the last film that they aired as a part of First Row Features was The Christmas Tree, a movie that was made in 1966 that then premiered on Nickelodeon in 1981. And here we are talking about it all the way in 2022, which is fantastic. On December 31st. Nope, I'm wrong. December 25th, 1981. Same day. Wow. I should have just paid attention to my notes. 41 years ago, on December 25th, 1981, we had the premiere of Kids' Rights on Nickelodeon, a show that, if you were listening to last week's episode, I went over somewhat extensively. It was a program in which a cast of actors would take story concepts that were written in from kids all around the country and act them out in a way very similar to Whose Line Is It Anyway, in that kind of style of improv comedy. So Kids' Rights ran for one season of 17 episodes. It was created by Jim Mayers, who, by the way, since I'm on the subject, Hocus Focus does not have a notable creator, but its writers are Lou Berger, Bob Keeber, Ellen Schrader, Larry Jordan, and Peggy Salone. Want to give them credit for the writing of Hocus Focus. And then for First Row, there weren't any creators there. But Kids' Rights was created by Jim Mayers. Yeah, debuting on Christmas. That's got to be a great feeling there. Everybody's at home, piled around the tube TV to watch some Nickelodeon. And a show that I'm a bit more familiar with, and I'm sad that it went out the way it did and not in the way that it was expected, but a show that ended 27 years ago on December 28th, 1995, we had the final episode of The Adventures of Pete and Pete. And what I mean by what I said before the intro there was The Adventures of Pete and Pete at one point in time had a film script that was going to be worked on, but at some point in the production, either it was just too late to get an Adventures of Pete and Pete movie out, and they decided to retool the script into what is known as Snow Day, which is ironic in bringing this up, as Snow Day was just remade on Paramount Plus as a musical, which is interesting. It's not a movie, might have its nostalgic fans, but it's not a movie that is going to be as fondly remembered for today's audiences. So I think that's ripe for rebooting, and especially if you're going to give it a musical treatment, why not? And the script, which has been confirmed by both Pete and Pete themselves, going around before it was Snow Day, was an Adventures of Pete and Pete movie. And I feel like, for as much as I can enjoy Snow Day, I feel like that prospect of a Pete and Pete film is just never going to leave my consciousness. The fact that it was once a possibility and it almost happened, and the script was then turned into Snow Day, it's always going to amaze me. But the final episode here, I didn't actually watch live, and the final season of Pete and Pete, it kind of showed its growth a little bit, and with Artie, the strongest man in the world, leaving the cast, I kind of saw myself not watching the show as much. Now, I feel like in a film, Artie would have made a comeback in some way. I know that saying that by the third season I wasn't watching as much, you'd go, well, then why would you want a movie? Well, it all really comes down to Artie, the strongest man in the world. And I feel like I asked the Pete's if they remember if he was in the script, and they don't necessarily remember that specifically, but I feel like he would have had to have been a part of that adventure in some way. If you're going to make a big screen Adventures of Pete and Pete movie, even though he moved on, it would have been a triumphant moment for him to make a comeback in a dire, if the Pete's are going up against a new big enemy and they're at their wits' end, they're at a moment where they're going to lose, and then Artie comes in out of nowhere. That's a big moment that I can see happening in a potential film. But yeah, the final episode is still a good one. And honestly, as I've grown up myself and have rewatched the show and gone back through and through again, I've enjoyed that final season a bit more now that I've gotten over the fact that Artie isn't a part of the show anymore. So I can finally enjoy it again. If you haven't seen The Adventures of Pete and Pete, I don't think there's a show we're going to be covering today that I could recommend for you to watch more than The Adventures of Pete and Pete. The show was created by Will McRobb and Chris Viscardi, and it ran for 3 seasons of 34 episodes. 17 years ago, on December 30th, 2005, the original pilot for Mr. Meaty aired on Nickelodeon. I know it's not everyone's favorite cut of choice, but my heart beats hard for Mr. Meaty. I love the show. There's something about the style of those puppets that they went with, the humor they have, and I know they throw a lot at the wall, but I genuinely feel like for what sticks, it's hilarious. There are some genuinely funny moments in the show that I feel like just have been overlooked because those who simply immediately disregard the show over its style lose out on some of the characters and humor that end up coming through in some of the episodes. I haven't had the opportunity to watch the show in full at this point in my life, but I feel like I still would have the same opinion afterwards as I do now, which is I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. I understand that, but there's something so quirkily beautiful about Mr. Meaty that I can't help but be happy that it exists. I just can't. I love so much of the care that went into those sets, and although you can immediately dismiss it as ugly, you can, over time, appreciate what the creators and the designers went with this world. They really tried to take the concept of a cartoon and cartoony designs and adapt it in puppets. And there are certainly puppets that have such unique ways in being used that they're unforgettable. Doug the security guard, for example, you'll never see a puppet on Sesame Street like that ever, in both design and attitude. So I can't recommend Mr. Meaty to everybody, but if you like any sort of irreverent humor, if you enjoy a little bit of dark humor, I think you can enjoy Mr. Meaty. And it's unfortunate that Nickelodeon, they were behind it for a time, but they kind of knew the audience wasn't there. I honestly think it was ahead of its time. I think it was too ahead of its time. I think there are moments in that show that are ready to be memed. I think there are unfound gems in that show that are ready to be taken out as sound bites and used in countless videos across TikTok and YouTube and elsewhere. So I honestly believe if you either have never watched or just threw Mr. Meaty to the side just based on its looks, it's worth checking out if you have the time. I recommend The Adventures of Pete and Pete more, but close second is going to be Mr. Meaty. And 5 years ago, on December 29th, 2017, we had the final episode of Harvey Beaks on Nickelodeon. Created by C.H. Greenblatt, the show ran for 2 seasons of 52 episodes, and if I could be fair, I believe the series finale for this show actually aired on Nicktoons Network, which is a practice that in some way I can understand. The idea of, well, you know, we have to have new content fluctuating on this sister channel. And to me, at first, I understand the idea of needing new content on both channels, but to continue the practice of starting a show on your main network to just throw it off to your sister network is not a good look. And I really, as a fan, enjoyed the aspect of the Nicktoons network more, where it was, hey, this is classic Nicktoons, but also once in a while we have a show from some other part of the world that you're only going to find here. And that's what made Nicktoons Network worth going out of your way to watch, was because it didn't have anything else on top of the stuff you also wanted to watch. Every time you would take a show from the main network and throw it off to the side, it wasn't a good look. It wasn't a good look more on the network than it was for the show. If anything, there was just always pity on the show, knowing that that was just a death sentence, knowing you're not going to continue on unless a miracle happens and that show blows up, which I'm sure every executive who would agree to move a show from the main network to the sister network would want to happen so that it blows up on that sister network. But then sometimes it doesn't, you know? Sometimes you just become FXX, which is just a place for new episodes of Always Sunny around countless reruns of The Simpsons. And that's not a fun network. You could just stop lying and move Always Sunny back to FX proper and then just make FXX the Simpsons network and have a 24-hour Simpsons television network, which, may I remind you, The Simpsons, I believe, is like one of the most watched programs on Disney Plus. So I'm not an expert here, and I can't see the numbers of FXX, and I can't tell you what does the best there, but it just, I don't know. It feels like with Nicktoons Network, the original idea being, hey, you know, Nickelodeon has Nicktoons, but it also has live action shows, and this is going to be the home for Nicktoons. It understandably from the start should be mostly Nicktoons, but there was always a nice element to have shows that were kind of Nicktoons-esque. And there was just something nice about that, and didn't really feel right to continually take shows that truly deserved a proper push on the main network just get shoved to the side. Harvey Beaks, I haven't had the opportunity to dive into for as much as I want, but its creator I adore to the moon and back. C.H. Greenblatt was one of the most creative minds to work on SpongeBob SquarePants, and then would go on to create one of the funniest cartoons that I watched as an adult in Chowder over on Cartoon Network before returning to Nickelodeon with Harvey Beaks, a show that ran for 2 seasons of 52 episodes, which I have to say, at least getting to that magical number of 52 is a nice little plateau, I would think. But I don't know if that's a good feeling to have your show just moved over to a network that's going to get less exposure and less publicity, and I'm sure that hurt in some regard. But in today's day and age, in the world of streaming where your show can be found at any moment's notice by an audience and be shared and find new plateaus of fandom, and Harvey Beaks will live on its own in new ways. And if you're a fan of Chowder, if you're a fan of early SpongeBob, if you're a fan of C.H. Greenblatt in general, definitely check out Harvey Beaks. I know I should take my own advice. I've seen so many clips online, and one of these days it's just going to be a show that I binge through, and I'll get back to you on how I feel. And that is going to be it for all of the shows that we are covering on this year-ending edition of This Week in Nickelodeon History. And it has been a wild ride, ladies and gentlemen, and it's going to continue to get wilder. But before we end for this week in Nickelodeon history, in this year in Nickelodeon history, let's dive into a top 5 that I think I covered on a previous edition in some way. I went through my list again, and just like Santa, I checked it twice, and I couldn't find at any point in time since starting at least this version of the podcast that I went over my top 5 favorite Christmas specials, which I know I've done on a podcast before, but I said, you know what? 2022, I'm on my knees, and there's a fairy wand to my head. Right now, top 5 Nickelodeon Christmas specials, go. And these were the top 5 that I quickly wrote down. Number 5, The Fairly OddParents. Christmas every day. It's the one wish that once you think of Christmas special and The Fairly OddParents, well, if you're Timmy Turner and you can wish for anything, Christmas almost means nothing unless every single day you wake up is Christmas time. That means no more work, no more school, and every single other holiday character is pissed off at you. What an incredible holiday special that The Fairly OddParents had here. Number 4, Danny Phantom, The Fright Before Christmas. An evil ghost is able to weave his storytelling and rhyming skills into the world of Danny Fenton, who is a bit of a curmudgeon during the Christmas season. And there aren't many action-oriented Christmas specials that I can think of out there, but this is always one that I love to throw on. Number 3, SpongeBob SquarePants, Christmas Who? the very first Christmas special for SpongeBob, one where once Santa and the whole concept of Christmas is introduced to him by Sandy, it takes over the entire town of Bikini Bottom. And if you don't like the episode at hand, there's no way you could look at me with a straight face and tell me that you couldn't tap your toes to the very first Christmas song. It's one of, if not the greatest Nickelodeon holiday song to come out of any show, and I won't take no for an answer. Number 2, Kenan and Kel, Merry Christmas, Kenan, an episode of the show that always has had my heart because it shows off what the true meaning of Christmas is. It's to be selfless, to give someone something to show them that they mean something to you, and it doesn't have to be incredibly expensive. It could just be by the merit of the gift itself. And in this episode, Kenan is working his buns off to raise money for a mountain bike as a gift for himself before coming across a child who would benefit from that mountain bike in a bigger way than it would for Kenan. And he does the selfless thing, and there's a whole song and dance around this, not literally, but it's one of my favorite episodes, and for the same reason, going into my very favorite Christmas episode, bar none ever, Christmas special, you put it up against Rudolph, Frosty, the Santa Claus, any movie, even my favorite Christmas movies, the Hey Arnold Christmas special stands above all the rest. It is the Mr. Rogers at the end of the ultimate showdown of ultimate destiny. The Hey Arnold Christmas special shows off in the biggest and best way possible the true meaning of Christmas. And it doesn't even come down to buying a gift. It's just about, hey, for this day, what's going to put the biggest smile on the face of someone you care about? And it may not necessarily have anything to do with buying a gift. And I'm sure any of the military families out there could know that the reuniting of family members on Christmas could be the biggest joy in the world. It could overshadow any gift that could be given. And what happens in the Hey Arnold Christmas special is a lot deeper and darker than anyone would expect going into it. And in my experience in showing younger audiences this special who have no idea about Hey Arnold itself or the show or the character, once the weight of the situation at the core of the story, even the most rambunctious third grader was stopping to watch the story unfold at that point in time. Once they knew there were serious emotional things at hand and that this was a bit more real than just your average Christmas special, that this wasn't just, oh my God, I need to get a tree. Oh my God, the family's coming. There is a lot more at hand in here. And if you have never watched the Hey Arnold Christmas special, if you have never seen it, even if you have never seen Hey Arnold at all, put that special on. There is no way that at the end of that, you don't add this into your yearly rotation, your yearly tradition of Christmas specials. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for our time on this week in Nickelodeon history and for this year in Nickelodeon history. The next time we talk to each other, it'll be January 1st, 2023. Now, there are going to be a few more episodes of This Week in Nickelodeon history up until our 1-year anniversary. And once we hit that, there will be a small hiatus before the show comes back in a new, big, and loud way that we're going to grow in tremendous ways, and we're going to get seen by Nickelodeon in some way, shape, or form, because when the show reboots, there will be purpose behind the show, a call to arms for all Nickelodeon fans, young and old, and I hope you are there along the ride with me. If you listened or watched any of my content through 2022, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. For those of you who consider yourselves a part of the ready crew behind Captain Eric, you have my appreciation. Thank you very much, and here's on to the next year. If you would like to reach out and write to Captain Eric, you can do so at nickelodeonhistory@gmail.com. You can also find me on other various forms of social media, including Twitter at I'm Ready Podcast and on Instagram at SpongeBob Podcast. You can also listen to my other podcast, I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast, dropping every Thursday simultaneously through most podcasting platforms and YouTube. Both video versions and audio versions of the podcast are available on Spotify as well. And if you would like to go the extra mile and throw your support to Captain Eric, you can click on the Redbubble link in the podcast description below, where you can find a multitude of most of my logos and few other pieces of art that you can put on a wide variety of different products, including stickers that you can get to throw in your water bottle as you prepare for the new year and get in the gym with me. I'm going to restart my regimen right back in January and continue to work my way to a healthy tomorrow. Thank you to all of you on the Ready crew. Please have a wonderful holiday, a safe new year, and we'll see you next year as we celebrate another week of Nickelodeon history.
I'm here with my friends, Nickelodeon, the song never ends.